Have you ever watched two people fall in love and wondered what actually happened in that moment? Not the flowers, not the fancy dinners, not the grand gestures everyone talks about online. Something smaller. Something almost invisible. Something that most people walk right past every single day without ever realizing what they just witnessed. Psychologists have spent decades studying human connection, attachment, and emotional bonding, and what they found again and again is surprising to almost everyone who hears it for the first time. The things that create the deepest emotional bonds between two people are rarely loud. They are not expensive. They are not dramatic. They are quiet. They are subtle. They happen in half a second, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, in a moment nobody is filming or planning or performing, and most people never even notice them happening, not consciously anyway. But the nervous system notices. The brain notices. And somewhere deep in the subconscious mind, a switch gets flipped that says, this person is safe, this person is different, this person matters in a way I cannot fully explain. Today we are going to talk about 7 of these gestures. 7 small, almost invisible behaviors that create powerful emotional reactions in the people who receive them. Most women have never heard of these because they are not taught anywhere. They are not in movies. They are not printed in magazines. They are not part of the advice passed down at family dinners or whispered between friends over coffee. They come from real psychological research on attachment theory, trust, nervous system regulation, and emotional bonding, research that rarely makes its way outside of academic papers and therapy offices. By the end of this video, you will see human connection completely differently than you did 20 minutes ago. You will start noticing these patterns in your own relationships, in your friendships, in your family, and in every meaningful bond you have ever built. But stay with me, because gesture number 4 is the one almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most powerful one on this entire list, the one that quietly separates relationships that fade from relationships that last for decades. Let's start at the very beginning, because to understand why these gestures work the way they do, you need to understand something fundamental about how the human brain processes connection and safety. The brain is constantly scanning its environment and the people in it for signs of danger and signs of safety. This happens below conscious awareness in a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threat and comfort in real time, long before your conscious mind has even finished forming a thought about the person in front of you. When someone makes a gesture that signals warmth, genuine presence, or focused attention, the brain registers it as safety. And when the brain feels safe around another person, something remarkable happens on a chemical level. It releases oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone or the connection hormone. This is the very same hormone released when a mother holds her newborn child for the first time. The same hormone that surges during hugs, laughter shared between close friends, and quiet, meaningful eye contact between two people who trust each other. It is the chemical foundation of trust and closeness, and it does not require grand gestures to activate. It requires small, repeated signals of safety. So when we talk about gestures that melt a heart instantly, we are not talking about magic, and we are not talking about manipulation. We are talking about biology. We are talking about tiny, almost imperceptible signals that tell another person's nervous system, without a single word being spoken, that they are safe here, that they are valued here, that this moment is different from every rushed, distracted interaction they have had all week. The first gesture is something researchers call sustained, relaxed eye contact. Not staring, because staring is something entirely different, and your nervous system knows the difference immediately. We are not talking about the intense, unbroken eye contact you sometimes see dramatized in movies, the kind that actually makes real people uncomfortable and triggers a subtle threat response rather than a bonding one. We are talking about soft, relaxed eye contact that lingers just a half second longer than what feels automatic or habitual, paired with a slight, natural softening around the eyes, the kind of look that says, I am here with you fully, and I am comfortable being seen by you too. This is different from a stare, because a stare activates the threat detection system in the brain, the same system that makes you instinctively tense up when a stranger holds your gaze too long on a train or in an elevator. Soft, relaxed eye contact does the opposite. It calms the nervous system rather than alerting it. Studies on human bonding, attachment, and nonverbal communication have shown, over and over again, that this kind of eye contact increases feelings of closeness and connection more powerfully than almost any other nonverbal cue available to us. Think back for a moment to the last time someone really looked at you while you were speaking. Not scanning their phone screen every few seconds. Not glancing around the room over your shoulder, half listening while their eyes search for something more interesting. Just looking at you, present, attentive, unhurried. It probably felt different. It probably felt like you mattered in that exact moment, even if nothing else about the conversation was particularly special. That feeling is not accidental, and it is not rare because it is difficult to do. It is rare because most people have simply stopped doing it. In a world of constant notifications, constant multitasking, and constant partial attention, someone who offers full relaxed eye contact becomes instantly memorable, instantly different, instantly safe. The second gesture is remembering small details and bringing them up naturally later without being prompted or reminded. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but it is deeply, deeply powerful, and here is exactly why. When someone remembers something you said weeks or even months ago, something small, maybe a food you mentioned disliking once in passing, a childhood memory you shared almost as an afterthought, a small worry you admitted quietly during a conversation about something else entirely, it triggers a very specific and very strong psychological response in your brain. The brain interprets memory as proof of value. It reasons almost instantly and almost entirely unconsciously that if someone bothered to store that detail in their mind and retrieve it later, unprompted, then you must be important to them. This response is far more powerful than any rehearsed compliment could ever be, because compliments, even sincere ones, can sometimes feel scripted or expected. Remembered details cannot be faked nearly as easily. They require genuine attention in the exact moment something was said, attention that most people, distracted by their own thoughts or their own phones, simply do not give. This is why people so often say things like, "She remembered something I mentioned once, weeks ago, and I don't even fully understand why it hit me as hard as it did." It hits hard precisely because being remembered is one of the deepest, most fundamental human needs we carry. It says you were paying attention when it would have been so easy not to. It says you cared enough to hold on to something small, something that seemed insignificant to almost everyone else. And that quiet act of holding on speaks louder than almost anything spoken directly. The third gesture is what psychologists call mirroring, and it happens so subtly that most people involved never consciously realize it is happening at all. Mirroring is when one person naturally, unconsciously matches the body language, tone of voice, or emotional energy of another person during conversation. When someone leans in slightly because you leaned in first. When someone slows the pace of their speech because you are speaking slowly and thoughtfully about something that matters to you. When someone's expression softens gently because yours softened moments before. This creates something researchers refer to as rapport, and rapport happens to be one of the strongest predictors of emotional closeness between two people in almost every psychological study on the subject. The truly interesting part is that mirroring works powerfully even when it happens completely unconsciously, without either person realizing it is occurring in real time. Our brains are wired with what neuroscientists call mirror neurons, specialized cells that activate both when we perform an action ourselves and when we simply watch someone else perform that same action. This overlapping activation is part of why we feel an inexplicable sense of emotional connection to people who move and respond in sync with us, almost like two instruments falling into the same rhythm without either one trying consciously to match the other. It creates a subconscious feeling best described as we are on the same wavelength, even if neither person involved could ever quite explain in words why they feel that particular sense of closeness so strongly. Now, before we move forward to gesture number 4, I want you to sit with something for just a moment. Everything we have discussed so far, the eye contact, the remembered details, the subtle mirroring, these are things you can genuinely begin noticing and even practicing in your own everyday interactions starting today. But gesture number 4 operates on a completely different level than the first 3. It is not primarily about what you do with your face, your eyes, or your body language in any given moment. It is about a deeper shift in energy, a way of carrying yourself through hard moments that most people go their entire lives never fully learning how to create for another person. And once you understand it clearly, you will start noticing its absence almost everywhere, in relationships around you that seem to struggle in ways nobody can quite name. The fourth gesture is emotional steadiness, sometimes described by psychologists as being a calm, grounding presence for another person. This is the ability to remain grounded, warm, and level-headed even in moments of stress, disagreement, uncertainty, or conflict, rather than reacting immediately with panic, defensiveness, or emotional volatility. Here is why this particular gesture matters so profoundly on a psychological level. Human beings, at a very primal, almost ancient level, are constantly drawn towards safety and predictability, especially in their closest relationships. When someone responds to conflict, bad news, or unexpected stress with panic or harsh reactivity, it activates a stress response not only in themselves but in the people around them as well, almost like an emotional chain reaction. But when someone responds instead with steadiness, staying calm, listening without immediately reacting, and communicating with warmth even in the middle of disagreement, it sends an extraordinarily powerful signal to the other person's nervous system. It says, without a single word needing to explain it, you can bring your problems to me, and I will not fall apart, and I will not make an already difficult situation worse. This is one of the rarest qualities a person can offer another human being, largely because most people were never actually taught emotional regulation growing up. They learned, instead, to react instinctively rather than respond thoughtfully. So when someone experiences genuine, consistent, calm steadiness from another person, especially during a genuinely hard or vulnerable moment, it creates a deep, lasting sense of trust that outlasts almost any single romantic gesture, no matter how elaborate or expensive. This is very often the quiet, invisible force sitting behind relationships that last for decades, long after the initial spark and excitement of something new has settled into something steadier, calmer, and far more real. The fifth gesture is physical touch that is casual and unplanned rather than deliberately romantic. This might sound surprising at first, so let's break down carefully why it works the way it actually does on a psychological level. A deliberate romantic touch, something like holding hands or a planned embrace, is expected within the context of romance. The brain processes it as a normal, anticipated part of a romantic interaction, and while it still matters, it does not carry quite the same element of surprise. But small, casual touches, a hand briefly resting on a shoulder while laughing genuinely at something funny, an arm briefly brushing against another while reaching for something nearby, these register very differently within the nervous system, precisely because they are unplanned, spontaneous, and completely natural rather than staged. Psychologists studying touch and human bonding have found repeatedly that non-sexual, casual touch releases oxytocin and simultaneously lowers cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, in both people involved in that small moment of contact. It communicates comfort, familiarity, and warmth without carrying any pressure or expectation attached to it. This is part of why people so often describe falling for someone slowly, almost without realizing it was happening in real time, through hundreds of tiny, unplanned moments rather than one single, big dramatic gesture that changes everything overnight. The nervous system quietly collects evidence of safety and warmth over time, long before the conscious, rational mind ever catches up and finally says, almost with surprise, I think I really care about this person. The sixth gesture is asking genuine questions and then actually listening carefully to the answer, rather than mentally preparing a response while the other person is still speaking. This might be the single most underrated gesture on this entire list, mainly because it seems so basic on the surface, yet almost nobody actually does it well in practice. True listening means your full attention is completely on what the other person is saying in that moment, not on your phone buzzing nearby, not on planning what clever thing you want to say next, not on the passing, unrelated thoughts constantly drifting through your own mind. When someone experiences this rare kind of full, undivided attention, something genuinely interesting happens on a psychological level. It creates what researchers refer to as felt understanding, the deep embodied sense of being truly seen and truly heard by another person, rather than simply being spoken to or waited on politely. Felt understanding happens to be one of the single strongest predictors of emotional intimacy in any close relationship, whether romantic, familial, or platonic. And here is the fascinating part that most people never consciously think about. People can almost always immediately tell the difference between someone half listening and someone fully listening, even when they cannot clearly explain exactly how they know the difference. There is something in the pacing of the response, the quality of the follow-up questions, the way someone's eyes stay genuinely present rather than drifting, that reveals real, authentic attention versus polite, performed attention. When someone experiences real, full listening, especially in a world where most conversations happen half distracted and rushed, it can feel almost disarming in the best possible way. It can feel like something genuinely rare finally showed up in their life, even if just for a few quiet minutes. Before we move to the seventh and final gesture, I want you to pause for a moment and think honestly about how many of these 6 gestures you have personally experienced in your own life, and how many of these you might already be practicing yourself without ever fully realizing their impact on the people around you. Because here is something important to understand clearly. These gestures are not tricks, and they are not manipulation in any sense of the word. They work precisely because they tap into real, universal human needs, the deep need to be seen, the need to be remembered, the need to feel genuinely safe, and the need to be truly, fully heard by another person. And the 7th gesture ties every single one of these together in a way that might completely change how you think about connection, trust, and love from this point forward. The 7th and final gesture is consistency over time, sometimes described by psychologists as reliability of warmth. This is the steady pattern of showing up in the same warm, attentive way again and again. Not only during grand, exciting, memorable moments, but also during ordinary, unremarkable, forgettable ones. Almost anyone is capable of being warm, attentive, and present during an exciting first date, a special occasion, or a moment when everyone involved is on their best behavior. What actually separates deep, lasting emotional bonds from fleeting, short-lived ones is whether that same genuine warmth continues to show up on a boring Tuesday afternoon, during an exhausting, stressful week, or in a quiet moment when absolutely nobody is watching, and there is nothing at all to gain from making an effort. Psychologists who study attachment theory in depth have found again and again that real trust is built primarily through repeated, predictable patterns of behavior sustained over time, rather than through single, isolated, dramatic acts of affection. This is exactly why someone can say 100 romantic things and still fail to build any real, lasting trust, while someone else who consistently shows up, remembers the small details, listens fully, stays emotionally steady under pressure, and offers warmth without needing a specific reason or occasion to justify it, ends up building a bond that feels genuinely unshakable over time. Consistency quietly tells the nervous system this is not a performance, this is simply who this person actually is, and that slow, gradual realization, once it fully settles in, becomes one of the most powerful psychological experiences two people can ever share together. So let's take a moment to bring all 7 of these gestures together in one place. Sustained, relaxed eye contact that quietly says, I truly see you. Remembering small details that says you genuinely matter to me, even the small things. Subtle mirroring that creates an unconscious sense of being on the exact same wavelength as someone else. Emotional steadiness that says you are safe with me even when things get genuinely hard or uncomfortable. Casual, unplanned touch that slowly builds comfort and familiarity without any added pressure. Real, full listening that creates the powerful feeling of being truly understood by another person. And finally, consistency, the quiet thread running underneath every other gesture. The one that transforms fleeting moments of warmth into deep, lasting trust over months and years. None of these 7 gestures require charm in the traditional sense, wealth, dramatic, romantic gestures, or conventional good looks of any kind. What they require instead is presence. They require genuine attention. They require the simple willingness to slow down in a world that is constantly pulling everyone toward distraction, speed, and surface-level interaction. And that might be exactly why they work so powerfully well, because they have become genuinely rare. In a world full of noise, constant half-attention, and fast performative interactions happening everywhere, someone who offers real, unhurried presence stands out almost instantly, even when the people around them cannot fully explain in words exactly why that person feels so different from everyone else. What is truly remarkable about all 7 of these gestures, when you really stop and think about it, is that none of them cost a single dollar. They do not require money, social status, or any particular type of naturally outgoing personality to pull off successfully. What they require instead is simple awareness. Most people move through daily life almost entirely on autopilot, distracted, half-present, rushing quickly from one moment to the next, without ever really settling into a single interaction long enough for it to mean anything lasting. The people who understand these 7 gestures, whether they learned them instinctively through experience or discovered them deliberately through reading and self-reflection, tend to build relationships that feel noticeably different from almost everyone else's relationships around them. Not louder relationships, not flashier or more dramatic ones, just deeper, steadier, and far more real. And once you personally start noticing these 7 patterns in daily life, you begin noticing them absolutely everywhere, in your closest friendships, in your relationships with family members, and in every single meaningful bond you have ever formed with another human being over the years. You slowly start to realize, almost with surprise, that real connection was never actually about grand dramatic gestures at all. It was always about these small, quiet moments quietly stacking up, one after another, until they eventually become something powerful enough to be genuinely called love, trust, or true belonging. If there is only one single thing I want you to take away from this entire video, let it be this. You do not need to become an entirely different person in order to create deep, lasting, emotional connection with someone else in your life. You do not need a rehearsed script, and you certainly do not need to perform for anyone. You simply need to slow down enough to actually be fully present in the small, ordinary moments that matter most. Because those moments are happening constantly, all around you, every single day, and most people are simply too distracted, too rushed, or too caught up in their own heads to ever notice them passing by unnoticed. The next time you find yourself with someone you genuinely care about, try practicing just one of these 7 gestures deliberately. Hold relaxed eye contact just a little longer than usual. Remember something small they mentioned in passing and bring it up naturally later. Listen fully, without planning your next response while they are still speaking. Stay calm and steady the next time things get tense or stressful between you. You might be genuinely surprised at how quickly and how deeply people respond to authentic presence, because deep down, underneath everything else, everyone is quietly searching for exactly that. Someone who truly sees them for who they really are. Before you go, I want to hear directly from you. Out of all 7 gestures we walked through today, which one do you personally believe matters the most in real, lasting relationships? And which one do you feel like you experience the least in your own life right now? Drop your honest answer down in the comments below, because I genuinely read every single one, and I would love to know More than almost anything else, which of these 7 gestures hit closest to home for you today?